Right? Deuteronomy 32 is called this when they don't love you. And in many ways, that title reminds me of a lyric from a song, which is ironic because this is the chapter in which God is giving Israel the song of Moses. And ultimately, one of the interesting things is going to be, even though, as we mentioned in the last chapter, Moses is getting, in some ways, what sounds like a harsh word from God, one of the hallmarks of impressive leadership, at least to me, is the ability to take pain and process it into something productive. And so it does not seem that Moses is speaking to the people in an angry way, but once again, he is still being very matter of fact. The reason he doesn't seem angry is because in the early verses, he's going to say, let my words fall like gentle rain or dew. But it's not long before he's going to get into the straight talk once again, when he's going to describe how just God is and how righteous he is in his ways and how he's been kind to Israel. But he's going to contrast how they have repaid him evil for good. Once again, he's going to recall history. And this time he's going to do it in a way that calls them to remember their origins and the condition they were in when God lifted them up out of their misery. And he didn't just save them, but he's going to bring them into a place of prosperity. He's going to talk about the way in which their prosperity is going to produce a desire to basically be enamored with other things and to give, as we talked about in the previous chapter, those other things credit for the things that God has actually done for them. And pause. There are so many modern illustrations for that. Why? Because whether it's raising kids or in relationships, or whether it's friendships or marriages, there's so many times where a loved one can forget about the value that a person had in their lives, and once they become successful, go on to want to give credit to others. And it's just a natural human tendency. And so here, God is going to describe the point at which he gets tired of them giving credit to idols, which in reality are simply the face of demons, he's going to say in this chapter. And eventually he is going to, in the same way he was willing to bless them, he's going to turn and heap misery on them. But he's not going to destroy them, and he's definitely not going to oppress them to the point where their enemies could claim victory over them, misunderstanding what God is doing. But he is going to do something that we probably in modern terms call allow them to bottom out. And so he's going to say, since you want to pray to these idols and these demons, we're going to see how much they are going to be willing to answer you. Because much like they were willing to watch you suffer when you were in your difficult times, you're going to see, just like you have other interests and you lose interest in God, they're not really all that interested in you. Thus the title, they don't love you. And so there's going to come a time where you're going to seek their help and they're not going to be there. And the point at which you bottom out is the point at which God is going to be willing to speak to you again. And even though I'm not sure it's possible for us to love God as much as he loves us, he sees our potential and he's willing to help us reach it. Jesus uses at least one illustration that can probably help us understand how, when in John 15, he says, he is the vine and we are the branches. Every branch in him that bears fruit, God prunes so that it bears even more. And that pruning portion of the illustration describes the painful way in which a portion of a branch can be cut off so that it becomes even more productive, thus the concept of reaching our potential. But he goes on to say something else. Every branch in him that does not bear fruit, his Father is actually going to cut away and cast into the fire, which brings to mind another metaphor, the concept of a good tree and a bad tree, where Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount is going to say, look, no good tree bears bad fruit. Likewise, no bad tree bears good fruit. Ultimately going back to where we are in Deuteronomy, where it says, if after bottoming out, we still are not willing to allow God to transform us into the potential that we have to love both him and the people around us, then at a certain point, he cuts his losses. And so when we come to him, he is not only trying to help us reach our potential in terms of our ability to love him and love others, he is likewise counseling us in the wisdom to understand how we can discern those trees in our lives that are actually bearing good fruit. And I've said it before, but an older, wiser teacher, after he became very successful and very famous, said it this way: I don't so much look at the way you treat me as much as I look at the way you treat the people around you who you don't think you need, so that I can better determine how much you can genuinely love me. And so, as we often say, his best to us as we go forward in him, God willing, this time, avoiding the temptation to ignore the red flags we can sometimes miss when we're trying to form relationships with people who don't genuinely love us.